Now that the WWE event is over, we have really just seen how the Disarmer became the most broken troop in the game when it came to attacking and defending, and it even led to controversy in professional tournaments. And today I want to go over exactly what made it so strong, and I also want to compare it to some of the other broken temporary troops that we have seen before, so let's get right into it. The Disarmer would be one of 4 temporary troops introduced during the WWE event, and it was by far the strongest and people caught on right away, and she basically overshadowed the rest of the troops because of how strong she was. And this really just reminded me of the first Mashup Madness event in which the Lavalon overshadowed the other 3 event troops because of how broken it was. She would have a bunch of different things that made her really strong, such as her ability to jump over walls, which made it so she could easily run through bases because she also did splash damage and she target defenses, and this basically made her a combination of the Valkyrie and Hog Rider, with her having the best elements from each of those troops. Her biggest downside would be the fact that she took up 60 housing space, which is really just crazy. However, that would balance out with her revive ability, which basically gave her 3 lives, meaning 1 life was technically only 20 housing space, and that is really what would make her super broken. When it came to attacks, she was really effective by herself, and you could add in some extra units like the Giant for some extra support, and these alone could really destroy a base, along with some spells to help out against things like the single target Inferno Tower and Monolith, since those were the biggest weaknesses for the Disarmer. This strategy also wasn't really spammy or anything, and I would say it was pretty easy to manage, and that is why so many people loved it and just used her for like pretty much every attack. And one thing that really did make her stand out from any of the other temporary troops from the past was the fact that she came with the removal of training time, meaning people could just constantly attack with her, and this made for some fun and easy progression, and really just made the Disarmer seem better than any other temporary troop because you got a lot more out of her during the time she was in the game. And she was so strong that she would end up getting nerfed halfway through the month, and this nerf made it so that her health and damage were lower, and the speed and damage increase from her rage were also cut in half, which was a big difference. Plus, this also made it so that she couldn't attack any air enemies, though that wasn't too big of a problem as there were normally support troops to take care of enemy clan castle troops. However, what I think is more important to focus on is her defensive abilities, since that is really where she stands out when compared to most other troops in the game, and especially the temporary ones. It is pretty easy for a troop to be really strong and broken on offense, and we have seen that many times with temporary and permanent troops. However, what we haven't really seen is a troop that is both broken on offense and defense. Currently, I would say the best troop for defense would be the Ice Golem, just because it is versatile and can be pretty effective against any attack strategy, but when it comes to offense, it is still good, but not really remarkable, and there are way more troops that are just more powerful. But when you compare that to the Disarmer, then you can see it is a different story, and you can even argue that she is even better as a defensive troop than an offensive one. And you do have to consider that you would only have one of them because that's just how they were implemented. However, what made the defensive Disarmer so dangerous was that she could still attack air troops after the nerf, since that only affected the attacking Disarmers. And more importantly, that nerf actually buffed the defensive Disarmer, as it gave her 3 lives instead of the 2 that she had before, and this made her behave like the attacking Disarmer. And this defensive Disarmer would really be the biggest thing you had to worry about when attacking a base, and most people would plan their attack around the Disarmer to try and avoid her for as long as possible, or to find a way to quickly get rid of her or something, but that was obviously hard considering she had 3 lives. Plus, it seemed like the defensive Disarmer targeted key troops like healers or something, and this was extremely frustrating for many players, and I know a lot of them just had to switch to an army without healers because it seemed like the Disarmer just targeted them or something along with your heroes and just other key troops. The Disarmer really just seemed to always know which troop would be the most annoying to lose, and she would go and target that, and it really was annoying for the attackers and is why she was so good on defense. So as you can see, the Disarmer was really good on both offense and defense, and this is what would make it arguably the most broken troop in the game. However, just to be sure, let's look at 3 other temporary troops that were considered to be extremely broken, so we can compare them and see if the Disarmer truly is better or not. So let's start with the Royal Ghost, which was first added back in 2019. And this was considered to be broken because it would be invisible at the beginning and it could go through walls, which allowed it to easily infiltrate bases and also made it extremely hard to counter, and it was undoubtedly the strongest troop that the game had seen up until that point. It was especially effective against smaller bases at the lower town hall levels, though it could still be used at any town hall. However, this is where the Disarmer proves to be better, as it is more versatile and is still very powerful at the top town hall levels. Next, we have the Lavalon, and this was considered to be the strongest troop ever made in the game because it combined the lava hounds and balloons, which had made up the whole Lavalon strategy, and this was, and still is, one of the most powerful and iconic strategies in the game. What made this so strong was that you could literally just train up a bunch of them and completely spam them and have a pretty good shot of walking away from the battle with a 3-star because these troops were so strong and you didn't really need any skill to use them. And while the Disarmer is still easy to use, it isn't quite as simple as just closing your eyes and spamming a single troop down, so that is why you could say the Lavalon was better on offense. But the main thing that sets these two troops apart is with the whole defense aspect, since the Disarmer could actually be used on defense while the Lavalon couldn't, so I think that does give the Disarmer a big advantage over the Lavalon, as well as pretty much every other temporary troop in the game. But finally, the last temporary troop to compare would be the Broom Witch, since this was also extremely broken. However, it was harder to use than most other troops because of its unique mechanic where it targeted wizard towers. But this was a flying troop that would spawn in its own troops, and these could all really dominate a base if used correctly, and their uniqueness really helped them stand out, and people were able to destroy bases once they figured out the strategy. So this was obviously a very broken troop. However, it would be harder to use than the Disarmer and still didn't have the whole defense aspect, which is why the Disarmer would be better and why it is actually the strongest troop to have ever been added to the game. And you can really see how the whole defense aspect plays a big role in this, because temporary troops generally can't be used in your clan castle, meaning they can't be used defensively, and this sets the Disarmer apart since she was a defensive troop in every base because of the event. And it would also be this that caused a lot of controversy for things like the Legends League, because a lot of players were upset that they had to deal with this in the league, which was supposed to be more competitive and serious, and normally these events wouldn't impact the leagues too much as everything would be optional. But with friend or foe, everyone had these army camps and they were unavoidable, which just made attacking harder and more complicated. But on the other hand, people were still able to use the event troops, and this made attacking easier because of how strong the Disarmer was on offense, and this is really kind of why people were saying that this season was ruined for Legends League, because it was so much more different than the normal game. And personally, I think this just shows how broken this troop was, since it was the main cause of this controversy. Plus, there was similar controversy with the Clash of Clans World Championship, because the event troops would be allowed in that, and people were saying that it was just unfair because of how strong the Disarmer was, and that it shouldn't have been allowed for something like this. And overall, you can see how much stuff the Disarmer stirred up due to how broken it was, and I really don't think we'll see another temporary troop quite as strong as it anytime soon, because I honestly don't know how Supercell can top it without going like way too far or something. But let me know what you guys thought of this troop, since I know a ton of people just enjoyed using it, and it was great for progression and was fun to use because of the whole revive mechanic. But that is also it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.